financial literacy, and the human condition. Welcome to Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rahaim.
What do I think about money and believe about money and feel about money can be really helpful to start to get curious. And what are the messages that I've received about money? What do I think is true about money? What do I think is good about money, is bad about money? And just getting curious about this is really a way that we can understand more richly ourselves and how we are interacting with others and the assumptions we're bringing to our engagements with others.
Hi, it's Frances. I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for watching this video. If you're catching us on YouTube, please help us help others by clicking like, subscribe, and all notifications so you don't miss any videos. And check back for the next video. I think you're going to love it. Thanks again. For more information, you can visit us at hugyourmoney.com.
Welcome to Financial Fitness. I'm Jay Dean, along with the Money Doctor, Francis Rahaim. Hello, we have a guest.
We have a lovely guest. We have
Yes.
Joy Slabaugh with us again. Joy is especially interesting to me as a guest because she's a licensed therapist and a former CFP and the creator of Relational Wealth Framework. That, how many times have people asked me, are you half marriage coach and half financial coach, right? But that to me is very interesting. So, we're going to get all touchy-feely about money and talk about the emotional root of financial decisions, all the stuff that really hamstrings us when we're making financial choices. So she describes her work as living at the intersection of wealth, well-being, and impact, which I think is incredibly accurate. So welcome, Joy, back to Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor.
Thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. Let's talk first about the Relational Wealth Framework. You coined that phrase. Can you teach us what that means?
Yeah, I really think of this as about our relationship with money and how money impacts our relationships with others. So I think of it as there's an internal relationship, how we think about our money, and then there's our relationship externally with others and the way money impacts that. So I really think about this as inviting people to consider both sides of this. And as we do that, this is really where we can start to see shifts in our relationship with money and how it impacts others. And that's where we get to experience more connection, more authentic connection with others, and a more impactful life as well.
That word relationship. I think in the forward to one of my books, Chris Collins, actually, who's no longer with us, a great guy, but he had written the foreword and he said, "When did my love-hate relationship with money begin?"
Yeah, well, we live in a capitalistic culture where money makes the world go round, and money impacts all of us, whether we realize it or not. And so this relationship with money is sometimes one we're not aware of, that we don't even think about what money means to us and how we feel about money. Or it can be a very intentional one where we become aware of how we think and feel about money and our attitudes toward money. So again, whether we're aware of it or not, we all have a relationship with money. Because we live in the culture that we do, and we grew up in the family, whatever family we grew up with, we tend to absorb beliefs and attitudes from what's around us. And so this can really shape our relationship with money in ways we may or may not be aware of. And so this can be a positive or it can be a negative or something in between as well. And so what I find just really fascinating is the way money impacts us and our attitudes and our values. And I really can talk about this all day long with people because it's just so interesting to me. And so again, I refer to it as a relationship with money, but it's like everything that we think and feel around money. So like an example for me is that one of my values around money is, to me, it represents safety and security. I find when I chat with people, we all have different money values. Oftentimes when you talk with people, it's either safety and security, or it is about freedom and independence, or it is about connection with friends and family, or some combination of this. And the safety and security one is really, really strong with me. And that has had a lot of impact and influences on how I live my life and how I engage with money. And that this used to be something that I was not really aware of. I just kind of did my thing. And I was like, yeah, I'm somebody who really values saving. Right. And then it was only as I got more curious and deeper into my own relationship with money when I realized, oh, actually, I'm treating money as a source of safety and security. So it can feel really threatening to me if I need to spend more money than I had planned. And that can feel really stressful for me. And it's not just because I'm spending more money, it's because my sense of safety and security is being eroded. So I give that as an example about how our relationship with money, whether we're aware of it or not, really can impact us in a lot of ways. And as we become aware of it, it opens up more possibilities of how we can be in this relationship and thus exist in the world.
This thing with money and relationships is always interesting. All those hidden beliefs that get us, I like to call it baggage. It's probably not the technical term, right? But can you give us an example of maybe a couple that you, obviously not with names, but a couple that, maybe one person has one set of beliefs, another person has another set. They're on completely different pages.
Yeah. Something that's really common with couples is where you often see different values is one really values saving and one really values spending. And it's really easy for these couples to end up at loggerheads with each other,
Yes.
demonizing the other of like, oh, you're a spendthrift who doesn't care about the future, and then the other one's like, well, you're a tightwad who doesn't want to have any fun, right? I'm sure you all have heard this with your own partner or friends or your parents, right?
No, never.
Right. We know how this plays out.
Sure.
And one of the things that is often overlooked with this is realizing that this is just about values, money values, and one is not good or bad. They're just different. And when we go a little bit deeper with people, we often find that the person who's wanting to spend is really trying to help the couple, their family, live life in the moment and not be so future oriented that they can't enjoy the present. And we'll find that the saver is really trying to shore up security in the future, right? That we can have fun in the future as well. And so when we help people get down to their core values, it's a lot easier to appreciate what the other is bringing. Well, you're of course, like I tend to be the saver person, right? When I hear that the other person is about enjoying the present, wow, that really resonates with me. And like I really appreciate that. That's a huge value add for me that they're helping me enjoy the present, right? And then what I bring is, okay, yeah, we can plan and save for the future, can make sure that we're going to be okay in the future. They can bring that, I'm bringing that value out of security and stability. And so this can really take what is often a hot button topic that people fight about with their couples therapist, with their financial advisor, with each other, with the kids, right? All the time. It can actually be an opportunity for closer connection with each other. And so money really can invite us to deeper connections with each other, and understanding our own values and appreciating the values of others is a path toward that deeper connection.
It's funny, Francis, I never thought about the fact that, you want help with your money, but you also want help with getting along and how the two, coexist or need it. You may need help with both. It's a whole new business model. Joy's got it down. Do you need help with your money or do you need help with therapy?
Well, the thing is that money problems show up in your relationship. And so that's where, for us, I mean, how long have we been talking about this exact thing? That's why I like to have Joy on as a guest, because she says all the things that we deal with. She says them very eloquently and from a professional standpoint, right? But one ends up being the steward of household finances. They're the one that pays the bills and handles the minutia, and that's their role in that relationship. And the other one often will hand over a paycheck and say, honey, you're doing a great job. I'll see you at retirement, right? When there's a stressor that's introduced, a kid has to go to college, somebody loses their job, somebody's sick, then this all just bubbles to the surface and people start pointing their fingers at each other. So one of these partners feels like they have a handle on where the money's going, but they're frustrated because they can't fix the problem. And they go to the other partner and say, we need to talk. Those terrible words, right? We need to talk. And worse than that, it's about money. And so now the sparks fly. And now the other person is feeling awful because they don't know how to solve it. They've been living in a bubble, right?
Mhm.
No idea that you're just not on the same page. As often as I use that phrase, we find for the most part, it's just about doing exactly what Joy just said. Just address get to the core of it, figure out what each person really does want, compliment them, right? That they're both trying to do the same thing. They're living in the same household, they're on the same team.
Mhm.
And if one of them's pulling this way and one of them's pulling that way, their wagon isn't going anywhere.
Mhm.
So when you get them together, then everything seems to get easier, and the positive reinforcement goes a long way.
I think that's really nicely said. And it's reminding me of another type of situation where you see different money values in couples. And that's often where you see class differences. So maybe one person grew up working class and
Yeah.
the other person grew up in an upper middle class family. Often they have very different attitudes toward money and very different ways of treating it. And I've seen all different versions of this, but this can be one that leads to so much conflict because each person grew up in one world around money. And we often tend to think that, well, of course, everyone thinks about it this way. Right. But that's not as we know, that's not actually the case. And so it can really lead to a lot of conflict when it's really much bigger than even just the individual, right? There are class-based attitudes toward wealth that can influence us, and expectations around money and expectations around lifestyle. And so all of these things can be influencing the individual and influencing the couple and influencing their relationship in ways they may not even be aware of. And so this is where the getting curious with ourselves about what do I think about money and believe about money and feel about money can be really helpful to start to get curious. And what are the messages that I've received about money? What do I think is true about money? What do I think is good about money, is bad about money? And just getting curious about this is really a way that we can understand more richly ourselves and how we are interacting with others and the assumptions we're bringing to our engagements with others.
What do
I don't
you,
know about you, Francis, but I am learning a lot here for sure. And I'm sure people have questions, but Francis, can we get your phone number?
of course, it's 413-773-3333.
Of course, as always, go to hugyourmoney.com. We will be back with more of Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Francis Ram.
Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor is underwritten by Franklin County Technical School. We build futures. Visit fcts.us or call 413-863-9561.
Welcome back to Financial Fitness. I'm Jay Dean, along with the Money Doctor, Francis Ram, and our guest, Joy. It's a joy to have Joy on.
Welcome back, Joy. So picking up on this relationship thing again, everybody wants to blame their parents. Why didn't my parents teach me about money?
Yeah.
Why did my parents teach me awful things about money? How much of an effect do you think that plays in the way that we grow up thinking about money and how difficult it is for us to change our habits based on what we learned from our parents?
Well, this is an age-old debate in the psychology field about nature versus nurture.
Yes.
And the reality is it's both. That yes, the things our parents do and say and we witness does influence us. And it's also not permanent. That we have agency. And so we can adjust these messages. And, our brains are not necessarily, don't have to be set. We can cultivate neuroplasticity, which is what allows us to form new beliefs and attitudes. So I want to offer that as hope to anyone who's maybe you recognize that your family relationship with money was kind of warped. It doesn't have to stay that way. There are ways that you can evolve this and grow and evolve and change. You're laughing.
I love that you used warped as a professional,
It's a good word.
that their relationship with money was kind of warped. Um, yeah. So, that brings me to a question. You are a rare combination of a therapist and a financial professional. How did that happen? There's got to be a story there, Joy.
Yeah, so I was a financial planner. I got into financial planning right after college, and I really loved it because you get to work with people. It's a lot of creative problem solving and a healthy dose of nerdy analytics, which I love.
Yeah.
And so I thought this is the perfect career, and it was in a lot of ways. And I went on to work with extraordinarily wealthy individuals doing really fascinating, intellectually engaging work. And I also noticed that while I was helping people solve some problems, it was sometimes also creating other problems. And that it wasn't the magical cure-all. Like financial planning is like, okay, yes, we have their money in order, but sometimes they're still really unhappy. Sometimes they still really feel anxious or feel all sorts of ways. And so I got really curious about, could there be more? And, essentially my job was to help wealthy people acquire more money. And I was like, there's got to be more to life than this. And so I, after a lot of introspection, decided to make a career change to become a therapist, specifically a trauma therapist, which is incredibly meaningful and rewarding work. And I really love this work. What I was really surprised, though, was that people were still talking to me about money. And I was like, no, I'm a therapist now. I'm not a financial planner now. And they're still talking about money. And I realized that, yeah, money does bring up a lot of emotions. I'd seen that as a financial advisor, was surprised to hear it coming in with my therapy clients. At first, I was surprised. But then as I thought about it more, I was like, well, of course, where else are people going to talk about money? A lot of therapists don't like talking about money. Financial planners, a lot of them don't like talking about emotions. So for many people, there's this big question mark of where and how do I get some support in navigating all these ways that money is impacting me? And so that's what then inspired me to move into the intersection of money and well-being and emotions and our psychology. And I really love this because now I feel like this work, I still sometimes do work with extraordinarily wealthy people. And I feel like I have an opportunity to help them transform their relationship with money, where they get to shift it from one of stress and isolation and help evolve it so it's a tool for connection, impact, and lasting fulfillment. And to me, this feels like a life well lived. So this is me bringing my life in alignment with my values.
It's
I
funny,
totally agree.
Joy, when you said people, it seems to me, let me put it this way, that people who have a lot more money would automatically be kind of channeled to a way to figure out how to make it work. I mean, are there people with a lot of money? It's just willy-nilly and they don't, there's another professional phrase, willy-nilly.
Well, I mean, there's the financial aspect and the math, and do you have your ducks in a row financially? There's that piece. But then there's this piece of imagine someone who builds a gazillion-dollar business, and this is their life's work. They've poured blood, sweat, and tears into this, all of their life into this. And then they got that big buyout, private equity bought it, and they got the giant payout and the big paycheck. And now, after they've sold it, they realize that was their entire identity. And who are they now? They don't have this business. They're not building a business any longer. Who are they now? And that can actually be really disorienting for people, and where they're really questioning who they are and what they're doing. I know someone who was so impacted by by the sale of their company early. They were, pretty lucky that they built a really successful firm, got a buyout, and they felt adrift. And then they spent 20 years trying to figure things out. And they eventually built a new company to compete with the one that they'd sold and get a second go at it. But I share this to say that like we like to think that money is going to solve our problems, and it will solve some problems. I don't want to pretend otherwise, but it also can create some problems, and it can also mask other problems that when we might not realize that, oh, I'm not super clear on who I am and what my meaning in life is because I'm so focused on amassing wealth. And then once we stop doing that, or there's a big event in our life, then that's gone. And now it's like, wait, what am I doing? Who am I? What actually matters to me? And those can be really uncomfortable questions to ask and can bring up really uncomfortable emotions.
Yeah, I think the masking point is really great because when I have clients who are very wealthy, they often think, I have enough money. All I need to talk to you about is, am I making enough money? Am I protecting my assets? Am I making enough money? What do I do if I want to leave it to somebody? How do I tick all the boxes? Do I need a trust? Very specific monetary questions. But in reality, I find that those are the people that very often, especially if they've inherited the money, if they haven't built it from the ground up, that very often aren't really in touch with their own values. When I start asking questions like, what's important to you about this? I get answers like, well, I saw this guy who told me I should have whatever. That's not the answer to the question I asked, right? So
Yeah.
but it is very rewarding when you can do that, when you can draw somebody out and figure out what they want. You call it wealth alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really good term to sort of align people's values with their money. Uh, and I want you to talk a little bit more about that. But I just wanted to bring up one thing about business people who grow a business and then do something else with it and lose their identity in the mix. And one of the things that I see that's really difficult for families, and I'd love to get your take on it, is they grow a business from the ground up. They have some children. They want the business to go to the children, and they do. And the children don't really want the business. And maybe they haven't said they don't want the business, or they want it, but their perception about what they want is skewed. They think they're just getting, this great thing that makes money, a license to print money. And in fact, they have to learn how to run this business. And I have this discussion with my business people who have that on their agenda, and say, can you get your kids to help run it? Can you teach them how to work it? But it's almost impossible. I find that those parents who had nothing in the beginning and have now amassed this wealth, all they want to do for their kids is not have their kids have to struggle. They just want to give them stuff. And
Yeah.
it seems to have a counterintuitive effect in the end. Can you, maybe you disagree, but can you talk to me about that? Tell
No,
us about it.
I very much agree with you. There's actually a book I'm finishing up reading right now that talks to this exactly around how wealthy parents, the way they tend to parent and the way money enables them to parent, actually can end up harming the psychological development of their children. And that the children of affluent families have higher rates of anxiety and depression than any other socioeconomic class. So there's a couple things with what you shared. Part of it is when we, as parents, of course, we don't want our children to suffer. And yet that is part of life, and learning how to tolerate discomfort is part of developing what's required to develop emotional regulation so we can be well-adjusted adults that can interact with other people in harmonious ways. When we interrupt that process in our children, it's often because it's really uncomfortable for us to watch them suffer or watch them struggle. And when we have vast resources, we really can throw money at every problem, not realizing that it might be creating problems for our children down the road. So that's one piece of what you mentioned. And the other piece of what you're talking about is this idea of the parents have the dream, they built the business, and then they want to keep it in the family and pass it down. And the second and third generation may have varying levels of interest and desire to be involved in the business. And I think, to me, this really illustrates the point about money values. We all have values around money, and they're often different. And in the example you shared, right, these are parents who have this value of really want to provide for my family. I want there to be this legacy. That's their value. Is that the value of their children, the next generation? Maybe, but maybe not. And that's where I feel we sometimes see this. Just a second. That's sometimes where we see this going a bit sideways, is one generation is assuming that the next generation has the same values. And many times they don't. They're different people, and they have a different cultural influences. There's a lot of things that can change from one generation to the next. And so what can be really valuable for families like this is to have conversations around their values. And their advisor or someone else can create a space for them to each talk about what their values are. And they can then appreciate each other's values and realize that collectively, this actually is enriching the family with these different perspectives. And it's okay that we can have different values. That doesn't mean one person is good and one person is bad. It's just different attitudes and values around money.
I totally agree with you on that. I noticed that when you were talking about, this is a little personal, but I always get a little personal with people I like. I noticed that when you were talking about, as a parent, you have children, you had almost a visceral response. Did something come to mind, a story or something that crossed your mind that you might be able to share with us?
Yeah, a couple things. I'm really curious about what makes people tick and why are people the way they are. And I think where this really resonates with me is I often work with people who are the product of wealthy parents throwing money at the problem to solve things. And I see what that does to people. And
Mm.
I see the ways where people can really end up struggling in ways that might be surprising, honestly, and the way it can impact people's ability to regulate their emotions. And thus, when we're not able to regulate our emotions, life is just a lot more painful and uncomfortable, honestly. And so, honestly, I feel like some sadness and sorrow realizing that for a lot of wealthy parents, in their effort to protect their children from pain and discomfort and throwing money at these problems, they are actually creating a life that is likely to be more emotionally uncomfortable than it needs to be. And it's this really just cruel catch 22, if you will, of the way what we want versus how things actually play out.
Yeah, life is terribly unfair in a lot of ways. And
Yeah,
that's one of them. I mean, the storybooks tell us if we just make good, we can make the next generation happier and healthier, and they will be grateful and do it
right.
again and again and again. But I think any sort of relationship comes with all its complexities. And when you add money to the equation, everything amplifies for whatever reason. I mean, you can say, well, it's just money, but just money causes a lot of problems. I talk about it being the third person in a relationship. There's you, there's your partner, and there's money, and you each have a relationship with that third person, and
Yeah.
it's money. Just give
Yeah.
it a name and acknowledge it, and figure out what you're going to do to keep it from rearing its ugly head when you don't want it to, and to play nicely with you.
That's a I really like that approach. Actually, like that's a really great idea to bring some playfulness and fun to this and take this unspoken thing, the third
Yeah.
person in a relationship being money, and make it actually spoken. And I love your idea of give it a name. I don't know, what do you
Thanks.
call it?
The money,
Clementine? Like
we call it the money monster.
love that. The
Money
money
monster.
monster.
Yeah.
Right. That then we can have a little humor around it, which humor is something that can make painful topics a little bit easier sometimes.
Yeah.
And also it then creates an opportunity for people to shift from seeing their partner as the other or the problem to no, 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 this is the money monster. And we
Yeah.
can be aligned as a team, corralling the money monster, if you will. So I love that approach that you mentioned.
Well, thanks. I've actually had people write to me and say, my money monster needs an appointment.
I love it.
We'll be sure to share your resources and let people know how they can connect with you and your work. But thank you once again for joining us, Joy.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you,
Our
Joy.
pleasure.
Francis, can we get your phone number one more time?
Of course. 413-773-3333.
And as always, hugyourmoney.com is a great resource too. Join us again next time for another edition of Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Francis Ram.
Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor is underwritten by
Hug your money, it's where you belong. Your future's waiting steady and strong. Dignity shines in the smallest stream. Permission granted to chase your dream. Permission granted to chase your dream.
Will you help us spread the word about financial fitness? Please like, subscribe, and choose all. Thank you.